Okay, so let's continue with our next video in our practice exam questions for AWS Certified Developer and State exams. So let's read the question number 41. An application uses Amazon Kinesis data stream to ingest and process large number of data records in a real time. So we know there is this is the AWS service Kinesis data stream which is used for the real-time data ingestion. So that application is currently using, an application is inserting the records into the Kinesis data stream. Amazon EC2 instance consume and process the data from the shards of the Kinesis data stream. So this application is a producer, and where they are storing the logs into Kinesis data stream, and EC2 instance is our consumer who is consuming the records, right? Uh, and process the data from the shards. So we know what is shard. I have covered in one of the video. So basically the partitions in the Kinesis data streams, so where the records are going to be stored. And within the EC2 instance, it is being consumed using some library KCL. Okay, the application handles the failure scenario and does not require standby workers. Okay, the application report that the specific shard is receiving more data than expected. So as an example, in Kinesis data stream we have, let's suppose, 10 shards. Out of 10 shard there is a one shard which is receiving more data. Basically it's not equally divided. One is receiving more data, remaining is receiving less data. To adapt to the change in the rate of data flow, the this hot shard means the shard which is receiving more data. We need to reshard it. Resharded means like we can split that shard into multiple shard. Assuming that the initial number of shards in the Kinesis data stream is 4. So let's suppose initially the total number of partitions are 4. After resharding, the number of shards become to 6. So earlier we have 4 shard, now we have 6 shard. What is the maximum number of EC2 instances we can deploy? So maximum number of EC2 instances we can deploy is 6, because we have 6 shard. And if we deploy only one EC2, then that consumer is going to consume only from the one shard. The remaining 5 shard will remain idle. So if we two, then two EC2 will consume from the 2 shards. The remaining 4 will be idle. If we deploy 6, then all the shards we can utilize. But if we deploy 7, right, or maybe 12, what is going to be happen? 6 EC2 instance will be allocated to the 6 shard, and the remaining 6 will be unutilized. Right, so we need to utilize the resources. The correct answer will be 6. So whatever the number of the shard, we can use that number of consumer. So correct answer will be 6. Next question, question number 42. A company uses CI/CD pipeline for its application on AWS code pipelines. Okay, a developer must write unit test and run them as part of the pipeline before staging the artifact to testing. So there is a code pipeline where you have multiple stages: build stage, deploy stage, deploy to dev, deploy to staging, deploy to production, or maybe there is a one manual approval stage. And we want the developer should write the test, but the test should run as part of the pipeline, CI/CD pipeline. So where the developer should incorporate that test, like after the production deployment, or like during which phase? Create a separate pipeline, totally wrong, because we need to do as part of the same pipeline. Update the AWS cold build specification to include a phase of running unit test. That is correct, because generally we run the test as part of the build step. So what we need to do is, whatever the build file, we need to update that file, and we need to add extra step to run the unit test. Install the code deploy agent, no. So create a testing branch in AWS commit, and no. So B is the correct answer. Question number 43. One second, just a second. Okay, so question number 43. A developer has written an application that runs on Amazon EC2 instance. So some application is running on EC2 instance and generate a value every minute. So maybe some random value is generating by that application. And the developer wants to monitor and graph the values generated over time without logging into the instance each time. So because application is running in EC2 and that application is generating some value, so developer want to monitor and graph those values, right? Uh, but without logging into instance each time. So the developer don't want to log into the EC2 instance. and they want it should be visible somewhere over the graph. What approach should it follow? Use the CloudWatch metrics reported by default. Uh, this looks wrong because the default metrics only will report CPU utilization, memory utilization, network utilization. It is not going to report your this custom details like what is the value generated by the EC2. So this looks wrong. Develop the application to store each value in Amazon S3. No, we don't need to send it to S3. Publish each generated value as a custom metric to Amazon CloudWatch. This looks correct because we need to generate a graph, right? And because this is not part of the default metric, so we need to generate the custom metrics, right? So publish the custom metrics within the code. Store each variable and add that list of EC2 and reported. No, we don't need to store as a variable within the EC2. No. So C looks correct. Question number 44. A developer is trying to get data from Amazon DynamoDB table called Diamond table. So there is DynamoDB table and developer is trying to get some data, right? So retrieve some data. The developer configured the AWS CLI using IAM user credential and executed the following command. So AWS DynamoDB get item, table name, and whatever the key. The command returns error and no rows were written. So what will be the issue? So generally the issue will be access issues because command looks okay because AWS, because we are running on AWS. What is the service DynamoDB? What operation get item? From which table this and which key this? So this looks correct, but what the general issue? General issue will be the IAM access probably. The command is incorrect. A totally wrong command is correct. The developer need to log it, etiquette AWS support. Wrong. Amazon DynamoDB cannot be accessed from AWS CLI. Totally wrong. IAM user need an associated policy with read access to the DynamoDB table. Correct. So because developer is using AWS CLI with some user credential, and that user should have the access of the this DynamoDB table. So D looks correct. Question number 45. A developer a development team is working on a case management solution that allows medical claims to be processed and reviewed. Okay. Users log in to provide information related to their medical and financial situations. And as part of the application, sensitive documents such as medical records, medical imaging, bank statement receipts are uploaded to Amazon S3. All documents must be securely transmitted and stored. Okay, so what they said is uh, there is some application which is going to review your medical claims. Like we generally issue some claims, bills. So we upload the bills, bank statements, etc. And as part of the application, everything is get uploaded to S3. But we want, because this is the sensitive documents, we want when the person is going to update it and when it's stored, it should be maintained securely. So what we can do? Use S3 default encryption. This can be answered because S3 default encryption will do, it can encrypt the record, but only while during the storing, not while during the transmission. So use Amazon Cognito or no. This is for the authentication. Use AWS Lambda to encrypt and decrypt object as they are placed. So totally wrong. So when they are going to place, only then encrypt. But what about the transmission? Use client-side encryption, decryption with Amazon S3. So this looks correct because we need to make sure it should be transmitted and stored. So both. So what we can do is at the client side itself, we can encrypt the record and then we can upload to S3. So once it's got encrypted, so when it's going to travel, so it will be secured. So D looks correct. Question number 46. A developer is planning to use an Amazon API gateway and AWS Lambda to provide a REST API. So API gateway and behind that there is a AWS Lambda. The developer will have three distinct environment, development, test, and production. How should the application be deployed while minimizing the number of resource? Okay, so they said the developer wants to manage three environment, developer, test, and production. What should the developer do? Create a separate API gateway, a separate Lambda function for each environment. Totally wrong. We should not create a separate Lambda function. because we have the facility, we can create a alias for the lambda function. uh, Assign region for each environment, no. Create one API gateway with multiple stages. This looks correct because we will create three stages: one is for dev, one is for test, one is for production, and one only one lambda function but with multiple aliases. So alias 1 will point into the development, alias 2 will be test, alias 3 will be production. Create one API gateway and one lambda function and use a REST parameter to identify the environment. No, so we need to update the code if we do this. So C looks correct. Question number 47. An application need to use the IP address of the client in its processing. So there is an application. So whenever the client is trying to access the application, so like whatever the client, whoever is the client, so they are accessing the application either mobile or laptop. So those devices have some IP. So that application trying to access the IP of the client, and the application has been moved into AWS and has been placed behind a load balancer. Okay, so there is a load balancer, and after that you have the application. However, all the client IP address now appear to be the same. Okay, because our application is behind the load balancer, so there could be chances when the application is accessing the IP, it is accessing the load balancer IP. So it doesn't matter whoever client is reaching, application is always logging the load balancer IP. So that's why like it's appear to be the same. The application must maintain the ability to scale horizontally based upon the scenario, the most cost effective solution. So you can't even remove the load balancer because we need to maintain the scalability. So what, how we can solve this problem? Because if we place our application behind the load balancer, it is going to by default it is going to log the load balancer IP, but we need the client IP. How, what should we can do? Remove the application from the ALB, totally wrong because we need to maintain the horizontality. Remove the application from the ALB, totally wrong. uh, Alter the application code to inspect the X forwarded for. So this looks correct because whenever you want to know whoever is the client, so that information we can get from the header, and there is a specific header called X forwarded for, who is forwarding this request. So we can use this and ensure that code can work properly, and this, by using this header we can get the information of the client IP address. Alter the application code to inspect a custom header. Alter the client code to pass the IP address in the custom header. No, so C looks correct. Question number 48. A developer tested an application locally and then deployed to AWS Lambda. Okay, while testing the application remotely, the Lambda function fails with an access denied message. So whenever you see the access denied mention, it should immediately come. There should be something related with the IAM policies. So update the Lambda function execution role to missing permission. Update the Lambda resource policy. So Lambda doesn't have the resource policy. Include an IAM policy document at the root of the deployment package. Wrong. Remove, redeploy the Lambda function using an account with administrative access. No. So we need to update the Lambda function role. So because Lambda is running and it's failed. So it means the Lambda is running using some IAM role, and that IAM role has some missing permission. So A looks correct. Question number 49. A developer must analyze performance issue with production distributed application written as AWS Lambda function. So maybe there are some 10, 20 Lambda functions written. So it's a production distributed, and we want to analyze the performance. So these distributed Lambda application invoke other components. So maybe like one Lambda is invoking DynamoDB and then some other service, then some other service. So we want to analyze the performance because this is distributed, so many services involved. So you want to uh, analyze the performance. How should the developer identify and troubleshoot the root cause? Like, how should we know? Because there are so many services. How should we know which exact services is creating the performance issue? Is it the Lambda? Is it the DynamoDB? Is it the S3 bucket? Is it the SQS? Is it the EC2? Because there could be so many services. So generally, when we want to know the performance and there are so many services involved, so the best service is the X-ray. Add logging statement to the Lambda function. No, because if we just add the login statement to the Lambda function, we can only know about the Lambda function, but about the other services. CloudTrail, no. CloudTrail is just to log the API, like which service is being called. Use X-ray. This looks correct because X-ray is going to tell, because when you see the X-ray graph, you will able to see, okay, which part is green, which part is red. Run Amazon Inspector agent. No. So C looks correct. Question number 50. A company is building a compute intensive application. So that is the compute intensive application. So that run on the fleet of Amazon EC2 instances. Okay. The application uses attached EBS disk for storing data. So EC2, and with the EC2, EBS is being used and the data is being stored on the EBS. The application will process sensitive information and all the data must be encrypted. So they said like, because when the data is being stored into the EBS, it should be encrypted. Okay. What should a developer do to ensure the data is encrypted? Okay. Configure the Amazon EC2 instance to use the encrypted EBS volume for storing data. This looks correct because we want to encrypt the data on EBS. So we have to use the encrypted volume. Basically, assign a KMS key. Add a logic to write to data to the Amazon S3 bucket wrong, because our use cases we need to write the data to the EBS rather than the S3 bucket. Add a custom encryption to the algorithm. No, why should we like modify the code? Use AMI with an encrypted root volume? No. So basically, we can do the encryption at the EBS level itself by assigning the KMS key. So A looks correct. So that's it. That's the end of the video. We have covered 10 questions and we will see in the next video. Thank you.